Today we will see about how we fabricate a base plate with an autopolymerizing acrylic resin. Now autopolymerizing acrylic resin is also called as cold cure resin material. Okay, so autopolymerizing resin is used in the fabrication of recording base materials, bases, and have the same basic chemical composition as heat cured denture base resins, except that the polymerization reaction is activated by a chemical accelerator such as an N-dimethyl P-toluidine. Now, this tertiary amine accelerator allows the polymerization to be completed at room temperature. Denture repair resins as well as specially formulated tray resins can also be used. Now, tray resins contain substantial quantities of fillers to decrease their elastic properties. So, how do we fabricate these record bases? There are basic three different techniques. Okay, so you have got non-flasking technique, you have got an alternating application of powder and liquid technique, or you have got a flasking technique. So today we will be demonstrating to you the non-flasking. So we will take the master cast first. We will start with the maxillary master cast. The first thing what we need to do is we need to mark out the sulcus depth, right? So this is a sulcus depth that we have developed after a perfect recording of the secondary impression, okay, using a custom tray. So the master cast is very important to us, and this is the cast that is going to be used for the fabrication of the complete denture. So any alterations or any damages to the master cast will obviously result in a faulty complete denture fabrication. So we need to protect the master cast at any cost, right? So the first thing what we need to do is we need to record the sulcus depth. So very carefully, just using a lead pencil, we just record a sulcus depth, which is going to be the extension of our record basis. But we start from the buccal sulcus, we mark the buccal frenum, mark the labial sulcus, labial frenum, and likewise come all the way to the opposite side of the cast, marking the buccal sulcus, buccal frenum, and finishing off. Likewise, posteriorly, we need to mark out the posterior palatal seal at the posterior vibrating line. So this is going to be the extension of our record base. The record base should not at any cost go beyond these lines. Okay. For the next step, we need to apply a separating media. So we take separating media on a clean brush, remove off the excess separating media that is there on the brush, and just paint it onto the master cast. There is no requirement to apply excess amount of separating media. Just a very thin layer of separating media will suffice. So if you notice, I am only applying a thin layer of separating media, mainly just brushing it on to the cast. So one more thing that you notice is that I have applied the separating media slightly beyond the line that we have drawn. So I do this in case if by mistake, if any of my material goes beyond my sulcus depth, the record base will still be easily retrievable. Please be careful that there should not be any pooling of the separating media in the sulcus. Usually you find separating media slightly pooling in the sulcus depth or in your palatal vaults. So all these areas should be careful. Now once this is done, I allow my cast to rest and I allow my cast to completely dry up. You can leave it under the fan That should be more than enough. Next, I will go on to the mandibular cast. In the same way, I will record the sulcus depth. I will record the sulcus depth, which is going to be the extension of my record this. So I do this for the mandible again. That, so it's well recorded. Okay, I'll take my separating media and paint on a thin layer of separating media on my cast. At this point, I would like to repeat. Please see to it that the separating media that you have applied is always of a very thin layer, merely brushing it onto the master cast. Separating media slightly extends beyond the borders to see to it that any excess material that flows out of that boundary area should not be damaged or should not damage our master cast. Similarly, any excess material that is pooled in the sulcus has to be cleaned out. And it is left to dry. Okay. So depending on the temperature, depending on the humidity level, it dries off pretty quickly, and this is how a dried up cast looks like, right? So it's all dried up now. We need to check the sulcus if there is no pooling. So there is no pooling of any material out here. Okay, so this is basically how a cast that is nicely adapted with separating media looks like, and this is the cast where there is no separating media, so it is very easily distinguished. So maxillary master cast and the mandibular master cast both have completely dried. Okay, they look good. I'm happy with the application, right? I don't see any pooling in the sulcus. I have applied the material, I have applied the separating media only where it does need to be applied. It's not there over here in the mandibular master cast because there is not going to be any tray material coming out there. So wherever the material is required, only there it is applied. Okay. So I have also kept pair of gloves over here. So any of you, if you are allergic, if you get any allergic reactions towards the polymer or the monomer, please wear gloves. Okay, very important. I am not allergic to this material, so I will not be wearing the gloves today. Fine. Sprinkler bottle, right? So a good sprinkler bottle you need to buy. You need to make a hole out here. So when the sprinkler bottle, when you purchase, this hole is not going to be there. You can just take a BP blade or a scissor or something like that and cut a hole out here. Okay, we need to check there should be free flowing material. So when you sprinkle, you should be having free flowing material. Take a syringe. I'm just taking a standard 2.5 ml syringe over here. You can take a 5 ml syringe, 10 ml syringe, whichever you're comfortable with. Okay, open up the syringe, the needle, give it a slight bend for easy application. That's about it. Alright, so this is how you prepare the needle. So once you're done with your work, you can place the cap back on the needle and you can close it like this for next time. This is how we can close it. Alright, keep your Lacan cover ready with you. Right, if you notice, I'm having a paper with me over here so that if any excess material falls down, it can be collected and it can be used again. Even if you have any excess material that falls on your Macintosh sheet, you can collect it. You can obviously use it again, provided it is not set material. If it is set material, you need to discard the material. Okay, so we will be starting with the maxillary cast today. So start from the palatal vault. Right? Go onto the sulcus And once you have built up the palatal vault, you have built up the sulcus, then go on to the alveolar ridge. Alright? Don't go beyond the thickness of more than 3 millimeters. If you get thickness of more than 3 millimeters, you need to further trim it out. So how do we start it off is, I take my sprinkler bottle, hold my cast at an angle and apply a thin layer of polymer first on my master cast. Okay, I slightly tap it to see to it that there is an equal application, and then wet it with my monomer. Tap it again to see to it. If you see now, the cast from underneath is not visible. Okay? The cast from underneath is not visible. One more thing, if you notice, is that there is a little bit of a gloss on the material right now. Right? That means that the powder and the liquid is still unset. And if you see the edges out here, you will see that there is a slight loss in the gloss. It has started to become dull, which indicates that it is almost started to set. So please remember, don't change the position of your cast when the material is still unset. Very, very important. So as you see carefully right now, you would see the gloss going away, which means that the material has now started to set. At this stage, even if you turn the cast, or even if you turn the cast upside down, the material is not going to move. Okay, so this is an important thing you need to remember, that only move the cast when the material has almost started to set. So like I said, we finish with the palette first, and then we go on to starting with the sulcus. Sulcus is quite easy. What you just need to do is apply the material into the sulcus out there. So at this stage, if you feel that there is any overextension of the material, if the material has gone beyond the extension that you didn't want it to, you can just take your carver and you can cut off the excess. So because I had applied a separating media over here onto the land of the cast, it's going to easily come out. So it need not be perfect right now, because we are going to go ahead with the trimming once the record base is ready. Okay. So I will quickly go ahead with the remaining. base plate is ready. Fine. So if you notice the base plate right now, you would find it not to be completely smooth. Okay, you will find some rough edges, you will find some overflow over here, you will find some overextensions out here, right? So there's nothing for you to worry about, because the next step is going to take care of all these problems that is there, right? So for the next step, our armamentarium is a good lap trimmer, okay, tungsten carbide burrs for acrylic trimming, sandpaper, and a mandrel to hold the sandpaper. Alright, so these things are important. You also need a straight fisher acrylic trimmer. So this is going to help you in relieving the fringes. Right. So we first start off with our base plate. We can drop the base plate in a rubber bowl with water. This will allow it to ease open and come out faster. Right? So we leave it in the rubber bowl at least for a few seconds, maybe around 10 to 15 seconds, like this. Right? So you see all the air bubbles coming out, which indicates that the base plate is lifting out from the cast now. So you see air bubbles out here, all the air bubbles out here, which means that the base plate is now lifting out from the cast. So very important for you to see all this. Okay. You can leave it in the water for a few seconds, maybe around 10 to 15 seconds should be more than enough. Alright. After that, you remove it out. Take your lacquer cover and wedge it in between from posterior and slightly tease it open, and your base plate is now going to cleanly come out like this. Alright. So when the base plate comes out, the record base comes out, you can easily appreciate all this excess amount of material that is. If you take it under a light source, you will be able to appreciate where your base plate is thin and where your base plate is thick. So I'm pretty satisfied with the thickness of this base plate. On an average, throughout it is maybe around 2 to 3 millimeters thick. Okay, it's quite stable. It is not flimsy, right? It is not flexing under any pressure. So it should basically be like this. Alright, fine. All this excess flash that you see around, all these things we will be taking care, and we will be trimming it down, but we will be keeping in mind the line that we have drawn on the cast, so that it is not getting trimmed beyond that line. It is going to stay within the boundaries of where we had already decided. Out carefully. One more thing, please bear in mind to see that there is no damage of the master cast that is taken place. Right? Very, very important. After removing the base plate, if you see any damage, or if you see any damage of the master cast, especially in the alveolar ridge area, you need to discard the master cast and fabricate a new master cast. Very, very important, right? This will not happen if you have got sufficient amount of separating media, if you have applied sufficient amount of separating media on the master cast. This sometimes students come and tell us that they had applied separating media but still the cast broke. That happens only when you don't allow the separating media to completely set. So if you go back in the video, we would see how I had applied a very thin layer of separating media and had allowed the separating media to set under a fan. So that is very important. So if you do that, you would see a clean surface like this. Clean, smooth surface like this. Okay, so let's start with the trimming. Use a lab micromotor for that. So this is the speed of the lab micromotor with which we want you to use. It should not go beyond 1500 to 1600 RPM. This is 16 indicates 1000 RPM per minute. Okay, so don't go beyond 15 to 16, right? This is how you start it. This is the hand control, this is the foot control. So always keep it at the hand control and start the micromotor. This is how a micromotor would start. Okay, I want you guys to all wear protective eyewear and mouth mask while doing this. And whenever you're trimming, do it under good light source. Take your cloth, back on your cloth, and just check whether the line is visible or not. Right? If your base plate is sitting right on the line, then you have nothing to worry. Once I'm done with trimming, I check my surfaces are smooth. Very important, because the next thing that is going to happen is this is going to go into the patient's mouth. So when it is going into the patient's mouth, you don't want any sharp edges. It should be completely smooth. If it is smooth to your finger, it is most likely will be smooth inside the patient's mouth as well. Anywhere if it feels rough on your finger, means it is going to be rough in the patient's mouth and cause any lacerations, or it can hurt the patient. So please see to it that it is absolutely smooth. Okay. So this is the basic smoothness you can get with an acrylic trimmer. If you wanted to make it further smooth, you need to change this. You need to go for the mandrel, right? So there's a way how you use the mandrel. The mandrel comes like this. You take your sandpaper, you fold it in, and you wedge it in between the mandrel like this. Okay. After you have wedged it in between the mandrel, please see to it that it is tight. It is tight. So it should not be easily coming out. So if I push it, it is tight inside the mandrel. Next thing that you have to know is you have to reduce the speed. So whenever you are using a mandrel, keep it at 10 RPM. Very important. That is 10,000 RPM. Okay. Again on it, you would see it rotating like this. Okay. Please don't be scared of it. Very slowly but very firmly hold your base plate in your hand and your micromotor like this. After a few seconds, you will feel that the efficiency of your sandpaper is coming down. It is not smoothening it enough. If you see the sandpaper completely worn out, remove it, change the sandpaper. For the time being, the sandpaper is fine, so I'll continue using them. Once I'm finished with the flange, if it's completely smooth, I can go ahead and smoothen my surface. Once I feel the efficiency of my sandpaper is coming down, I off it, check, inspect my sandpaper, see it completely worn out, fine. I remove it out, take a fresh sandpaper. Push it in between, nice firmly. Okay. And it once again. So this is how my base plate will appear, smooth. Okay, you see a little bit of undulations over there, not a problem. You can take your acrylic trimmers wherever you feel that you need to do any slight smoothing. You can smoothen that with your acrylic trimmer. So like I was telling you previously, if you are careful while the fabrication, if you have made these areas smooth with the fabrication just by tapping it on the table while applying the monomer and the polymer, applying a good equal thickness of the monomer and polymer when you're fabricating it, all these will be taken care when the trimming. Your trimming phase is going to be very smooth and very short trimming procedure. So that should be. This is a record base anyhow. This is going to be discarded. So much smoothness if you get, it should be enough. So this is how it appears after it is trimmed. This is how it appears after when it is not trimmed and not smoothened with the sandpaper. So this is basically how it is going to appear. Remove it open, inspect it once again under a light source, and that is basically how it is going to appear when it is trimmed and smoothened and when it is not trimmed. Okay. One thing I forgot to mention is the usage of a straight fisher burr. So you take a straight fisher burr, fix it back, and you can just nick it out here to give relief for the labial frenum and the buccal frenum. So when you're doing patient work, if you have any doubts on the cast, you can obviously check in the patient's mouth also, and you can trim it. So this is how you relieve the labial frenum, and this is how you relieve the buccal frenum. Obviously the buccal frenum is a more wider V-shaped notch like this. That's because it's an active frenum, it has muscle attachment. This is a passive frenum, so a thin notch like this using a straight fisher burr should suffice. You keep it back on the cast and you check if your frenums have been relieved well. If they're relieved well, that's more than enough.